British politicians love looking towards politics in America. They speak the same language, so we can understand it and have detailed opinions. We can have detailed opinions on who's up and who's down. We do it ourselves. Mea culpa. But it's all so much more glamorous than Westminster. And many Labour politicians were quick to send their congratulations to Zohran Mamdani, new deputy leader. Lucy Powell said this: "Congratulations to Zohran Mamdani on such a clear win in New York. His victory shows that boldness and a story of economic change in the interests of the many, not the few, defeats the politics of division and despair." London Mayor Sadiq Khan was also keen. He says New Yorkers faced a clear choice between hope and fear, and just like we've seen in London, hope won. Huge congratulations to Zohran Mamdani on his historic campaign. Mamdani's leadership and his victory put some close to Labour's leadership in an awkward position, though. This new left-wing mayor has exactly the kind of politics, avowedly socialist and anti-imperialist and even anti-Zionist, that Starmer and his coterie have spent the last half-decade denouncing. So would they reluctantly celebrate his win, or would they distance themselves from the politics that seem to have won over New Yorkers? Cabinet member and Uber loyalist Bridget Phillipson found a third option: just plead ignorance.
Do you like him? What do you think of his candidacy?
I'll be honest, I don't follow American politics especially closely. I've seen a bit of it online, but he's clearly fought a good campaign if he's managed to secure such support.
Do you really not follow it closely?
No, genuinely. I'll follow the big stories, but not especially.
I mean, some people might say this is quite a big story, though, right? He's the New York mayor.
No, it's a big story. I mean, I'll follow, the activities of the US government. I'll follow what President Trump has to say. But no, I've got, as we'll probably come on to talk about, I've got quite a lot to be getting on with.
So, it's so easy to say, look, he's probably not from my wing of the party, but he was clearly very effective and he communicated well, and I wish him all the best. Instead of just she clearly knows who Zohran Mamdani is. Right? I mean, good for her. I hope she spends more time on the education brief, which is her job, than reading about Zohran Mamdani. But all you need to have done is read a couple of articles over the past 2 weeks and she would know what he's about. So sort of say, oh, I don't know whether to say I like him or whether to say I don't like him. Let's just pretend I've never really heard of him. Zohran Mamdani, who? Oh, yeah. Oh, I don't know. Who knows? Interestingly, one cabinet minister who is more ambitious than Bridget Phillips, and she wanted to be deputy leader. I think this man wants to be leader, is not pretending that he hasn't heard of Mamdani. So Wes Streeting says, inspirational campaign and victory for Zohran Mamdani in NYC. Lessons for progressives the world over. Now this is, Wes Streeting is really, his shadow leadership campaign has been going on a while. He's the one who sort of talks the toughest about reforms, racism, and now he's sort of allying himself to, he's saying he's inspired by Zohran Mamdani. I have a sneaky suspicion that Wes Streeting would have preferred Cuomo to win. Wes Streeting is not like Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer clearly isn't a very political person, doesn't have much ideology, doesn't really know what he's doing. Wes Streeting is a very ideological person. He's very politically strategic, and all of his politics are the complete opposite of Zohran Mamdani. Like Wes Streeting, very pro-Israel, hates the left. His whole career has basically been about standing in opposition to the left. So this is an opportunistic endorsement. It's also absurd. Now, that's because it's not just the case that if a Mamdani-like figure were to stand to be a Labour candidate for a major British city, Streeting would oppose them. He wouldn't just oppose them. In fact, he wouldn't need to, because a Mamdani-like person would never have been allowed to stand as a Labour candidate in the first place. Now, I imagine this is obvious to most of our viewers. I'm preaching to the converted to some degree. But let's look at some data points anyway, in case anyone skeptical is watching. In 2021, Rebecca Long-Bailey was sacked as Education Secretary for saying these 6 words: Maxine Peake is an absolute diamond. Long-Bailey there, as you'll probably remember, was sharing a profile of Maxine Peake, one of Britain's most celebrated actresses, who also happened to be a constituent and friend of Rebecca Long-Bailey. The reason this tweet was so offensive, though, and fell foul of the Labour leadership was because Peake, in the interview, among many other claims, had mentioned that US police officers had been trained in Israel. This was Starmer's response.
Well, the sharing of that article was wrong, and because the article contained anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, and I have therefore stood Rebecca Long-Bailey down from the shadow cabinet.
It was wrong because it contained an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. Would Zohran Mamdani ever have done such a thing? This person that now Wes Streeting appears to endorse, would he have done anything so extreme as to share an article where someone made a connection between American police and Israel? Well, actually, he went one step further and made the connection himself.
And I think that for anyone to care about these issues, we have to make them hyperlocal. We have to make clear that when the boot of the NYPD is on your neck, it's been laced by the IDF. Right? We have to make, not specifically that example all the time, but just to say that for working class people who have very little time, who have so many stresses, who are under so many pressures, there isn't that much time for symbolism. We have to make it materially connected to their life.
Now, that clip would have 100% got Zohran Mamdani, if not kicked out of the Labour Party. It would definitely have meant that he could not stand to be anything in the party. It was from 2023. So actually after Rebecca Long-Bailey shared her terrible "I like Maxine Peake" tweet. The clip has caused controversy, we should say, but Mamdani didn't walk it back.
What does that mean? I mean, that was just 2 years ago. What does that mean that the boots of the NYPD have been laced by the IDF?
It was a reference to training exercises that have taken place between the NYPD and the IDF. And I've spoken again.
So do you still believe that the NYPD is basically working in hand in glove with the IDF?
No, what I've made very clear is those are training exercises that were a concern to me. And what my focus is on working with the NYPD to actually deliver public safety for New Yorkers across the 5 boroughs.
So he's saying, it's not implicit, it's not an anti-Semitic trope. It was true. They were doing these training exercises. Interestingly, in that interview, if you watch the whole of it, he basically goes on to bring it back to public safety. He's like, because the thing he really did shift on, as was mentioned with Bastani, is this idea of defund the police. He was very clear. I have changed my mind on the police because I think they're really important for the safety of New Yorkers, and I will fund them properly, and I will, I'm going to support the police force that I will be the boss of. But the Israel thing, he didn't walk back at all because he said those training events did take place. Clearly, that would not have been allowed in today's Labour Party. Let's move on to evidence point 2. We're moving on to Andy MacDonald, who was suspended as an MP in 2023 for saying this.
Palestinians have been deprived of their basic human rights, their dignity and their freedom. We will not rest until we have justice. Until all people, Israelis and Palestinians, between the river and the sea, can live in peaceful liberty.
Now, I still think suspending Andy MacDonald for that is one of the craziest things Keir Starmer has ever done. Right? So from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. That can be considered an anti-Zionist slogan, which I think is completely fine. But some Jews find it offensive. MacDonald didn't even say that, right? His answer implied there would still be an Israel. There would still be a Palestine. He's talking about Israelis and Palestinians explicitly living in dignity, right? It's not even a one-state solution slogan when he uses it. So it's completely bizarre to kick him out. Of course, when it comes to anti-Zionism, Mamdani has been far more explicit than anything said by Andy MacDonald.
Do you support Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state?
I support Israel's right to exist as a state with equal rights. I believe that every state...
Why not as a Jewish state?
Because I'm not comfortable supporting any state that has a hierarchy of citizenship on the basis of religion or anything else. I think that in the way that we have in this country, equality should be enshrined in every country in the world. That's my belief.
That was such an impressive answer. Again, I'm sure it wouldn't be allowed in today's Labour Party. But I do think the fact that Mamdani has won in the world's most Jewish city outside of Israel just shows you don't need to pander to the ridiculous blackmail that says you have to be an ardent Zionist or you're effectively a racist. Obviously, this section could go on for a very long while if we're going to talk about all the people who were kicked out of Labour or blocked for standing for ridiculous reasons. Let's just remind you, though, before I go to Ash, of 2 more prominent left-wingers who could have gone on to energise Labour's base, but who were blocked from standing for positions. So in 2023, Labour blocked Jamie Driscoll from the North East mayoral list. Driscoll was at the time the North of Tyne mayor, so very qualified by all accounts. But his crime was appearing alongside award-winning filmmaker Ken Loach. I mean, you're not allowed to stand next to actresses, or you're not allowed to praise actresses or stand next to film directors. That seemed to be the rule in the Labour Party for a while. Ken Loach had set his most recent films in the North East, hence he was appearing with Jamie Driscoll. Next, we have Faiza Shaheen, who was selected by local Labour members to stand as MP for Chingford, but stripped of her role just weeks before the 2024 general election. Her crime, liking a tweet in support of boycotting Israel and liking a Jon Stewart sketch about the Israel lobby. Ash, if Zohran Mamdani was in the Labour Party, first of all, I mean, they probably would have kicked him out. If they hadn't kicked him out and he tried to run to be the candidate, they would have found a reason to make sure that he could not run as the candidate. Obviously, American electoral law is different, but if this were in the UK, they would have definitely said, we're not enabling you to get on the shortlist. Then they would have thrown everything at him so that he didn't become the candidate, like they did to Faiza Shaheen, who then won the Democratic vote in her constituency. And then, so even if he won all those different things, which Mamdani did, if he won the primaries, even afterwards, they would have still said, we're finding some way to strip you of this. There is no way that a Mamdani-like figure would be able to stand for Labour anywhere in this day and age. So sort of the idea that Wes Streeting saying lots of lessons to learn is part of his leadership campaign, clearly, but it's dishonest, let's say. Wes Streeting being dishonest. Anyway, give me your thoughts.
Well, look, I think if failing all that and Mamdani still managed to squeak through Labour Party processes, Morgan McSweeney would put him in a sack, tie it up and throw it in a river. It's funny that we're talking about this tonight because actually we've got a Downstream coming out on Sunday where I interview Paul Holden, who, as viewers may recall, is an investigative journalist and author of a new book called The Fraud, which is about Keir Starmer's rise to power. And one of the things that we talk about, and I think that this is the relevant context for thinking about, well, why is it you can have a Zohran Mamdani-like figure emerge as a Democratic candidate, even knowing everything we know about the culture of the DNC and what establishment Democrats are like, vast sums of money poured into the campaign against him. Why is it that you can still get a Zohran Mamdani, but you can't even get a Faiza Shaheen here in the UK, right? So we're not talking about a mayoral candidate for a global city. What we're talking about is a constituency MP. Well, I think a lot of that has to do with, one, the specific history and structure of the Labour Party, and then two, this more recent period of Keir Starmer and Morgan McSweeney's recomposition of the Labour Party. So this broader historical context is that the Labour Party in so many ways is uniquely factional. And I'm talking about at every single level. So even before the rise of Corbyn in 2015, even electing constituency officers, right? So I'm talking about the constituency Labour Party level. It was so ferociously factional. I mean, I'm not exaggerating much when I say that you could wake up with a horse's head in your bed. It really is something which prioritizes these dark arts of smears and also you trying to use points of principle or political difference, not because you believe in them and you think, well, this is a meaningful difference between me and someone else, but to discredit and demonize your opponent. So that's something which is really baked into the Labour Party at every single level. There's another thing, which is the way in which patronage networks function. So, you're going to rise to power because you've been under the wing of somebody else. You see this also a lot in aspects of the trade union movement as well, not the rank and file, obviously, but thinking about the trade union bureaucracy. And that's something which the Labour Party shares much of its DNA with. And so those patronage networks also really function as a driver for factionalism and the weaponization of exclusions and so on and so forth. And then you've also got the way in which the Labour Party is built. So yes, you've got the leader, but then you've also got the General Secretary. And the General Secretary and his ability to reshape the staffing and the machinery of the Labour Party, make it do various different things, has also meant that you don't just have factionalism in the form of political conflicts at a democratic level, but factionalism that takes place within staffing as well. And then within the operation of various party functions. So the compliance unit, the governance and legal unit, all of these become weapons in a war. And so then along comes Morgan McSweeney and Keir Starmer. So one of the things that Paul Holden's book does very well is lay out that Morgan McSweeney had a plan. And he knew how to take the temperature of the Labour membership and present Keir Starmer in the disguise of everything they wanted. But also there was this really determined attempt to reshape the Labour Party. So one, that meant getting rid of left-wing candidates. So that would be the likes of Faiza Shaheen, obviously the removal of the whip from Diane Abbott, Lloyd Russell Moyle as well. All of these figures had to be drummed out. The second thing was you had this unique opportunity, which is you had a very low number of Labour MPs, but their polling indicated that they were going to win many more. So if you could stitch up all of these candidate selections and get in lobbyists, people that were friendly to Labour together, people who are Zionists, people who are on the right of the party, you can recompose what the parliamentary Labour Party looks like. And then there were real attempts to recompose the Labour Party membership. So one, that would just mean demoralising people until they quit the Labour Party in disgust. Keir Starmer, very, very successful at doing that. And then secondly, using expulsions on the flimsiest of pretexts to get rid of the left. And so that's something which worked for candidates, but it also worked for rank and file membership as well. Now, you might say, as many people do, well, won't that leave a massive hole in your funding model? Well, not if you replace them with big money donors. What seems to have happened with Mamdani is that, there were vast sums of money poured into his opponents during the primary process, but the Democrats can't recompose their membership in the same way. They can't just say, all right, we're going to stop you from being a registered Democrat in the same way that the Labour Party can. And then the second thing is you've got not just the primary system, but then you've also got the mayoral election itself. You had big money swinging in behind Cuomo, but you don't have that stranglehold on the ability to run a campaign that the Labour Party has. So it means that Mamdani can design a campaign and execute it in the way that he wants to. And that's going to be powered from the, much smaller donations that he's able to garner from his supporters. So I think that there are all sorts of structural reasons as well. And it's not just to do with the personal beliefs of people in the Labour Party. It's how those beliefs work together with the machinery to result in a particular outcome.
I mean, it's also electoral law, right? I mean, it would be great if in this country we had primaries where, because I think if the Democratic Party tries to screw you over in a primary, there's sort of legal recourse because it's written in state law how this works. Whereas anything in the Labour Party, it's the Labour Party can do essentially what they want because it's a private organisation. So when you say, how can they possibly do that? They're breaking all the rules. There's very little you can do to make a private organisation follow its own rules, which is why they could basically get away with anything, which I think is quite bad when you're in a two-party system. There's sort of the two parties that are inevitably going to be incredibly important when it comes to access to state power can do what they want. Of course, it's all well and good us pointing out the Labour right are hypocrites. There's also another criticism of reactions to Mamdani's win from the Labour soft left or elsewhere indeed. Now, that case was put by Patrick Maguire on Times Radio this morning.
How are you?
Do you want the honest answer?
I think I do. We've got a bit of time.
I'm pretty wound up. I was scrolling through Twitter, now known as X.
Heard of it, yeah.
And I was bombarded with Labour MP after Labour MP saying, Zohran Mamdani shows us how to win. We finally know how to beat reform. And I just look at these people and think, get real. Just get real. Like, get a grip. Why don't you try, now you've worked out how to win in New York, trying to win in Wales, trying to win in Labour's historic heartlands, to use that dreadful cliche. They've worked out, apparently, that the way to save progressivism is to run a singularly charismatic, brilliant communicator who understands the modern attention economy against a disgraced sex pest who killed a load of old people during COVID, allegedly, or that's how people in New York see him, and do it in the biggest liberal city, one of the biggest liberal cities in America. And that's apparently how you beat Nigel Farage and challengers to your left as a singularly unpopular government in a parliamentary system in Britain. It's just, I'm just sick of this. And also, where were these people when Labour won 11% of the vote in Caerphilly? Like, get real, guys. Get a grip.
But I mean, also, even they may think that Mamdani is one of them. He doesn't think he's one of them.
No.
Yeah.
And look, it's just so depressing. It's sort of like this is the most energetic I've seen the Parliamentary Labour Party in months. And it's because of a mayoral election in New York. I mean, I'm not being parochial. I'm not saying we can't learn anything. And the guy is a brilliant communicator, a fantastic campaigner, etc., etc. But I mean, there are bigger problems and more pressing issues for you guys to deal with.
Ashley has got a point, hasn't he? Because I suppose we should be absolutely clear. Obviously, he's talking about people who aren't really democratic socialists anyway. But if you're a left-wing socialist, Mamdani winning the mayoralty of New York is very, very significant. It's something that didn't seem possible. It's incredibly significant in terms of sort of leftist politics and how people understand that. I mean, a lot will depend on whether it goes well or not. But both from, Labour soft lefties, who I don't really know what they're talking about, and then also people on the actual left sort of saying this is a model for how you beat right-wing populism. It is jumping the gun a bit, isn't it? Because sort of people trying to defeat right-wing populism have never really struggled in capital cities of major economies. Right? They struggle in the rest of the country. So there is a real danger of overgeneralizing or sort of overreading this as saying, aha, this is how you win. This is how you beat right-wing populism. You become really left-wing. And the proof is that this left-wing guy won New York, a very progressive city. Do you think people are getting a little bit carried away in terms of not the significance of this, because I do think it is genuinely, undeniably very significant, but the replicability of it, the generalizable nature of what has happened this week?
Michael, why do you have to ruin Zohran Day for everybody? Come on. Comes but once a year. Not even that. Look, in terms of overgeneralizations, but I think that happens when you get a big result anywhere. People have a tendency to sort of overly extrapolate and apply things to their own context. For what it's worth, I do think that there are things to be learned, but it's not necessarily the case that Zohran Mamdani's campaign is going to tell you how to win in Redcar, but it could tell you how to win with a really radical candidate in London or in Manchester or in Liverpool or, cities with, a fairly progressive population and ones with the sort of distribution of multiracial working class and downwardly mobile graduates, which are very similar to the kinds of demographics that you see in New York. So there are plenty of cities in the UK that in some way resemble the demographics that New York is dealing with. And I think that there's plenty to learn from there. And in terms of, why is it that you're having figures on the Labour's soft left and, Labour right saying, there's so much to learn from Mamdani? Well, one is, as you said, Wes Streeting is probably trying to do Keir Starmer 2.0, which is present himself as more left-wing than he is to endear himself to the membership. But then there's also a second thing, which I like to call West Wing syndrome. And you see it all the time because, let's face it, British politics is not glamorous. British politics is inherently frumpy. It's a sensible shoe from Clark's. It's a kind of, damp, crumbly biscuit. It's a lukewarm tea. It's a drafty church hall. There's no glamour in it. And when we do have series about British politics, we've got Yes Minister and we've got the thick of it. We've got things which make us look, seem a bit arch and sarcastic, but a little bit flatulent at the same time. There's very little glamour. Whereas America, brash, bold, big, perfect teeth somehow, despite the fact that they don't have healthcare. And I think people get really seduced by that in our political class. And I find myself doing it as well. I'm probably not exempt. I probably get a little bit seduced by the promise of America. And you see it when you've got those, state visits to the US and, how excited all the journos get, but not just that, how excited the politicians get as well, because America is a beast of mythic proportions. So I think that it's something which can obscure reality just a little bit.